So my name is Diogenes Rettori. My name is there in case you quite didn't understand how I said it. My Twitter is Rettori. Please follow me. I'm paid by the amount of followers I have, so I need more. So I'm gonna have my friends here introducing themselves.
Hey, okay. The mic does actually work. All right, so I'm Paul Morie. I work on Kubernetes at Red Hat, and I lead the Kubernetes Service Catalog SIG and the engineering efforts around catalog at Red Hat.
And I'm Steve Speicher. I'm on the OpenShift product management team with Diogenes. I work on developer and user experience as well as the public cloud offerings.
And my name is Serena Doyle. I work in the UXD group at Red Hat, and I lead the UX efforts around OpenShift as well as some of the other management products.
Awesome, thanks very much. So I think I assumed this concept of idea or the developments around service catalog and brokers in Kubernetes might be somewhat new to some of you. So I'm going to ask Paul Morie to come here, and he's going to explain a little bit. He's, as he said, he's the lead developer in Kubernetes for this. So Paul, please come to the stage and give us like
Sure.
your little bit of your show on this.
So there's really four entities you have to understand this problem space. We'll just talk from where most people in the audience are going to lie as far as like day-to-day using catalog. Say that you want to consume a service, right? Where a service is just some abstraction corresponding to a capability that you want to use. That's you. You're the service consumer. The catalog is where you go to find which services you have access to and to provision new instances of those services and bind to them in your applications. Service broker is a component that manages a set of capabilities. So the catalog presents the services that are provided by n different brokers that your cluster operator has added into the catalog. And the bridge between the catalog and those service brokers is this Open Service Broker API, which is the community synthesis of stuff that was previously the Cloud Foundry Broker API. Is now called Open Service Broker API. We have folks from Red Hat, obviously, from Pivotal, from Google, from IBM, Fujitsu, SAP, that are working together on Open Service Broker API. So catalog understands Open Service Broker API. Service brokers implement Service Broker API. And the service provider, the line is a little blurry sometimes between what's broker and what's provider. But basically, the provider is the thing that really has the capabilities that the broker presents. Is that? All right, cool. Demo next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Same.
So as you can see, the landing page is all new here. And we're going to show you folks what it's like to provision a new message queue via the catalog. Let's see, which one? Not my computer.
He can't Mac. He can Linux very well.
It's true.
Yes.
Linux, yes. Mac, no.
Yay.
So what you're seeing right now is, say that you have an application, you need to use a message queue in it, and you don't want to have to know the details about where that queue comes from. It might be provisioned in a number of different ways. Could be some SaaS service out there somewhere. Could be an Ansible playbook that's creating a new message broker and message queue for you. The point is, that's not your problem. All you want to do is say, this is the name of the queue, and click Create, and you get it. That's the level of detail that you're interested in. So what's happened now is that this queue has been created, And when I clicked create, there's a API resource created for the Service Catalog API server controller. There's a controller that picked the event up for that create and went out and talked to the broker that provides this service and said, I want a new instance of this thing. It provisioned it, gave us back a response and said it's done, and now I can bind to it in my project. Oh, sorry. Your trackpad works differently too. So you can see here, under provision services, I've got the queue that I just had provisioned, and I can now create a binding to it. So what binding is I have an instance of this thing. I need to work with it in my application, and I want to manifest information about how do I use it into my application as a secret. I think probably most of you are familiar with secrets and config maps. So I'm going to create a binding now. And I'm just going to create a secret in my project that gives me the coordinates to use this thing and the credentials that I need to use it. So you can see here, the secret that was created via this binding has the host to talk to, destination address, some other information about coordinates, and now, if I were to go and start a new pod, I'd be able to consume this secret in my application pod. So we're going to just leave this up because there's different things to talk through, but that's a demo in a nutshell. If you would like to see more, there's going to be some stuff in Jim's keynote, and I have a session on Wednesday afternoon to talk in detail about some of the mechanics of this stuff.
Okay, thanks very much. And just to head start with a few questions here, I'm going to ask Serena a question. So this is a completely new UI for us on OpenShift. So before we had, or let's say traditional, somewhat overview UI for OpenShift, which is this that we see here. It's a somewhat revamped, but the way to add things to a project was this way before. So from this situation to now where we're at, it's a completely different view, right? So if you could talk a little bit about the thoughts and the logic that we put behind this new user experience for OpenShift.
Sure. So, some of this functionality in the UI actually will be phased in, not necessarily all seen at the initial release. But the thought is that we're going to keep things in context, keep the user in context, and use more of a guided approach. So what we've done initially is we've added a home page which allows you to have quick access to search the catalog, browse the catalog, as well as have a day one experience, which is the panel on the right-hand side, which then ends up switching to a day two experience to give you access to all of your projects. But then once you click view all, it allows you to get into the projects and work the way that you had previously. Going forward, what we'll also allow you to do is when you're sitting inside of your project, access the searching capability the same way that you do from the initial landing page, so that things will allow you to be in context. So that's a quick overview.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a question. This question goes to Steve. So what types of applications do you think people are likely going to use the Service Catalog and Broker for, or what types of services?
Yes, I think initially it's some typical things you would expect. You see things as database, being able to provision stand-up database. Some of those require maybe some simple configuration scripting in order to get them set up and right, and some provisioning logic, some a bit more complicated, some on and off the platform, and things like you just demonstrated, messaging services. So I see a number of those things being available in the catalog. But as you see, as Serena said, the experience is really driven around how a developer wants to perform certain actions. You know, they want to start by building an application. They would then want to add a database service or a message queue service to it. So it allows for those type of flows to just keep a single experience and keep incrementally adding capabilities onto their application.
Good. Thank you. And for people that want to build their own service brokers for their own service providers, are we going to have, what's the plan for that from a Kubernetes perspective?
Well, so the plan is, I have two different facets of that answer. So in a vacuum, if you want to build your own broker, we've been working on a broker SDK that is basically gets you from, you've heard of the concept, to you have a broker that operates, it's operational. You can write like a manifest file to say which services your broker offers, and you can fill in business logic about how provision, bind, unbind, and deprovision work. We do also have some brokers that are in progress to expose OpenShift templates as services via service broker, and also to orchestrate these provision, bind, unbind, deprovision actions with Ansible playbooks too. So there's a few different options, and I think the story turns into if you can accomplish what you need to do with OpenShift templates, write a template. If you need something more than that, you can write an Ansible playbook, or Ansible playbook bundle is the term we use for this group of playbooks. And if you need really custom stuff, you can use the SDK.
Okay. Questions from the audience? Yes.
So the question is,
Repeat the question. When do you expect all these things that you mentioned to be released?
right, excellent question. So we have in 3.6, there are going to be some of the features that you're seeing in the console, and the core mechanics are going to be there. It's going to be tech preview in 3.6, and we're hoping for a GA release of this stuff in 3.7. Thanks.
More questions? Yes.
Is the SDK currently available for customers?
It's available, but I will let me set expectations that it's pre-alpha. So
What's pre-alpha?
meaning that the first folks that try to use it will be furthering the cause of science as guinea pigs. So the URL, which maybe we can get it up in text at some point, it'll be displayed on a slide in my talk tomorrow, is github.com, OpenShift, open-service-broker-SDK. So any guinea pigs that want to help science move inevitably along can clone that repo and start playing around.
Definitely welcome. So there's another, Joe, you want to grab this question on that side? There is no aisle down the middle, so.
Why don't we do that? Can you talk about what kind of services? Is it just on-platform services or off-platform services? And then I'll go grab this question.
Yeah, so as I was saying during the demo, the interesting thing about this is that as a consumer of a service, you don't actually have to know whether it's in platform, outside of the platform. There's a range of different services that we're interested in that range from like self-service, give me a new thing that lives in my own OpenShift project, ranging from that to I need a new instance of this SaaS service that I want to use. So it's all over the board, and the key thing about it is that as a consumer of it, you don't have to know and differentiate between those things.
There was a question.
Hey, I had a couple different questions. One was from looking at this UI and the user experience in terms of what the developer is doing, how do you guys think about promotion between environments, and how does that differentiate, right? So once the developer has built the environment, used a message queue and so on, and you want to promote it into prod, what does that experience look like? And a separate question was, if you're integrating secrets and through secrets mechanism, how do we handle rotation of secrets?
Okay.
So I can take the first part.
Go for it.
A second. So the promotion is done like any other application you have on OpenShift today in some sense. You'll set up as a developer sets and provision certain services, and they'll have a certain SLA associated with it. You would then work to operationalize it and put some promotion around it such that you can extract away that config data and then use either the test instance and then strap in as you promote through your pipelines into the staging environment and whatnot. So I see it as kind of a similar way, and as we are learning and going forward with this technology, we'll improve the experience around that as well, because it's still, being developed at the same time. We're taking some of these key scenarios and feeding them in to how you would actually use it. Because, right, a developer would not start day one saying, I want this, high SLA expensive backend database for their application. They may just have something that's free and start playing with it and then try to migrate from there.
Yeah. I want to add a little bit to that, is that there's a very good aspect that we're bringing this API from the Cloud Foundry ecosystem, that they've been doing this for, let's say, 3-4 years. And the kind of question that was asked was also asked to them, like, how are we going to differentiate the development environment services to production environment services, right? And I can just give you an example showing the environment that I have here. It's a simple environment called Game Apps. I call it the dev environment, but my applications, they are reading the configuration from the same place. So in my example, I'm reading the configuration from /data. And in my project, I have provisioned a queue that's mapped to /data in my pod. Let's say it's a development environment queue. If you move that to a production environment, you're going to have an instance of that queue that represents a production instance, yet mapped on the exact same folder in your pod, so that when you see your applications moving from one environment to another, the application feeling is that it's always reading the configuration from the same place, but the actual service that is bound between the dev environment and the production environment are different services. So in the dev environment for that project or that namespace, you have a binding that represents a dev instance of a queue. And during the production environment, you have a binding that represents the production binding of the queue, but the way you read this information is the exact same. So you can move across environments without having to change or fiddle with configuration in this. And
now, if you ensure that the naming of these resources is uniform across environments, we'll also be able to do an export of the API resources that back all of this stuff. So you could conceivably have a flow where you got things just so in your dev environment, export the resources that represent your instances and bindings, and then move them to another environment, similar to how the existing export functionality works in OpenShift. So there was another question, though, about rotation. And I think the sense that I understood the question in was, is there a special API pathway to rotate credentials that involves the service broker API? I could not actually see who was speaking, so could you verify that that is the sense in which you meant the question?
Yeah, in general, when we use sequence, it's hard to do key rotation. How do you do that, especially now with service broker?
So secret rotation in general is a fairly complex topic, but I can tell you from the standpoint of Service Catalog that Open Service Broker API right now does not have a way to, like an API endpoint or message that would let a service provider signal a consumer and say, you need to rotate these credentials. There are a number of features that we want to add to the API, and that would definitely be on the list, so that the service provider could say, hey, I've got a new set of credentials that I rotated in for you. This is what you should use now. And the consuming platform could update the secret in place or use whatever other rotation strategy you wanted.
Yeah, and we're going to get into secrets a little bit more in the next session, which is on Kubernetes and the cluster infrastructure, because it's a big topic in the Kubernetes upstream, encryption at rest, vault integrations, rotation and management. So the second section that we're doing in a little while, we'll cover that in more detail. So, other questions on this or anything related to, yeah?
Is it too early for this, but is there any quality of service enforcement, resource quotas, and, for instance, chargebacks with cloud forms, things like that?
That's a really good question. So decomposing it a little bit, the typical quota mechanisms that OpenShift customers expect, I think, are definitely going to be part of the GA release. I'm not sure whether we will have them for tech preview, but you should definitely be able to quota number of instances, number of bindings. For the question about quaz parameters, I think that will depend greatly on the implementation of the service. So if your service, or rather, if the service you want to use is one that has robust quaz capabilities, there are going to be mechanisms that let you specify parameters. So if, for example, you wanted to, parameters on a provision and a bind. So if as part of a provision, your service supports some type of quaz tier that the user can select, definitely there will be a way that they can choose that during provisioning. Does that answer your question? Excellent.
And I have a question. How much of this that we're talking about, service catalog and brokers, is Kubernetes and the UI? How much of this is things that are in OpenShift only?
Good question. So the back end that supports the demo that you've seen is a project that is in a Kubernetes incubator repo. There's a service catalog SIG in the Kubernetes community that is developing that repo. Obviously, the console stuff is all us. Does that answer your question?
So theoretically, I could have the console API talking straight to a Kubernetes cluster on the service catalog API, and should be able to get the list of services, I would say.
Right. As far as the where the service broker lives, it doesn't really matter. You just need to be able to reach it. Okay. So that might be hosted in Kubernetes. It might be hosted in another OpenShift cluster. Might just be hosted somewhere out in the internet. Who knows where?
And a question to Serena here. On this UI that we have, there's clearly different areas. I see this upper blue area where some large icons and dummy text. That's the advantage of unreleased product. You can actually have dummy text. So if you could talk a little bit about the logic behind these different areas and the expectations that we have for them.
Okay, sure. So there's four main areas. The top area you can see is a search bar that you can search the catalog to order something. The secondary area that Diogenes mentioned with the 4 icons, that's a customizable area. Well, on online it will be some Red Hat SaaS offerings. On-prem, that could be a customizable area where you could actually have links to anything that you want there. And if you customize it so nothing appears, it would be shut off, turned off. The bottom area is the ability to browse the service catalog. At this point, at the initial tech preview, we don't have we only have search capability. We don't have faceted filtering, but we will have that going forward. And then on that right-hand side, again, that's when you first bring it up, when there's no projects that exist, you'll have access to a tour that will show you around the home page, also some help resources. And then once you start adding projects, that becomes your access to your projects. And again, there's some customizability that's there that can be done, and so that can change.
It's an interesting aspect that I'm not actually in a project yet. So I'm on an experience that's before getting into a project. So I can choose where I'm going to deploy my project or my key or my service after, not necessarily as part of this. So, good. More questions from the audience? There's one here and one there. Let's start with the one Diane is running.
Will this bring with it the ability to publish new templates, for example, into the catalog from non-OpenShift namespaces, specifically for on-prem? And second part of that is, will it also allow fallback towards some of those published templates?
Yes. So first, the sort of two questions in one. If this will allow other things that are not necessarily from a Red Hat, or for example, other templates to be published in this catalog. I think I'll allow Serena to answer that one. But then the question is like, how much RBAC will play into this service catalog? I think either Steve or
I can take it.
Yeah.
So the template broker we're currently working with actually is services templates as they are today, so from the OpenShift namespace. And we're looking to evolve that where we could expand it to additional namespaces. So if you wanted to place them there and then put some RBAC on it, that could put some controls over what people see. Right now, we're just, for lack of a better way of saying it, getting it going underneath this new model. And then looking to expand some of the use cases to support aspects like that. But that's a good example if you wanted to provide something additional into the platform. Different ways of solving it would be to, put in a different project or namespace and selectively expose that. But that would require some coordination to be able to pull that off on obviously our product. So
that probably beyond 3.6 then?
yes.
And I was just going to say, in the ability to get things into the catalog, there will be the ability to add custom content in there, and based on how items are tagged, you'll see different categories, and things will live in different areas based on how things are tagged through your broker.
Yeah, you could write your own broker to bring in your own content to the service catalog as well.
So I think there's an unanswered question about RBAC. So in the tech preview version, I'm not positive whether we'll have RBAC. For GA, it's definitely a requirement. And there's some interesting technical challenges, like precedent that we have to establish for how we do RBAC over the services resource. But ultimately, you should be able to choose whether a particular project or user has access to any one of these services on like a fine-grained level.
I was going to add something. So the question about multiple user namespace or multiple namespaces being the source for the templates, there actually is a pull request that should go into 3.6, which allows you to, at the platform level, select it. But to Steve's point about the more granular, if you wanted to expose different catalogs to different people, that's a further thing. So hopefully it won't just have to be the OpenShift namespace in 3.6, and I think that's likely we'll get it in. The UI doesn't care. So the best part about this UI, and this has really been the focus, is the UI just talks to the catalog and sees everything. And so the subdivision is up to you if you want to categorize those templates and make them show up into the work that Serena's team has done along those lines. No, you will not. So if this PR goes in, there will be multiple default namespaces that can contain templates.
So we have time for a few more questions. And just to remind you, Service Broker, Service Catalog, this is some of the newest stuff we're working on. That's why we wanted to feature it. But these guys up here also work on things like source to image and Jenkins, CI, CD, the current console, the current CLI. So any questions you want to ask around any of those topics is open as well. So just raise your hand and we'll pass you the mic.
Yeah, there's a template broker that exposes OpenShift templates, and there's also an Ansible broker that Todd's team is working on. I'm not sure if Todd's in the room right now. And we're actually, okay, so Todd and John are in the back there, and they work on the Ansible Playbook bundle broker, where instead of writing templates, you're writing Ansible playbooks that can do provision and bind, unbind, deprovision. And we're actually going to go into some level of detail tomorrow. Todd and I are giving a talk about Service Catalog and the Ansible broker. So if folks are interested in Ansible, which I've heard Ansible is somewhat popular these days, do check out our talk tomorrow.
Just so you know, Ansible has more stars than Kubernetes in GitHub, just so you know. Okay.
Noted.
Yeah, one more point here is provision and bind are just API calls. So you can call the OpenShift templates, you can call the Ansible playbooks, but you can call anything, right? You could call Helm if you're using Helm. You could call, bash. You can call it anything that you can put behind that API that would get triggered on a call into it from the catalog, you can put behind it. So if you have some existing automation beyond what Red Hat works on, you can integrate that as well.
So I just wanted to also announce that we have a UXD booth during the week of Summit, and among many of the sessions that we have 3 specific ones covering OpenShift. So if you're interested in learning more about what we've done with the UI or give feedback, we'd love to see you there. We'll be in the partner pavilion.
I do think we still have more time for questions, maybe like 5 minutes, yes? So we can take 2 or more questions, 1 or 2.
Questions?
No?
So actually, Diogenes, can you talk about the intersection with middleware, the JBoss middleware portfolio, and how that's going to tie into the service broker?
Yes, I can. So as you saw here, the demo that Paul showed was a demo using this new thing, weird thing called NMAS. That's the upstream name of a project for messaging as a service that's based on yet another open source project called Apache ActiveMQ Artemis, right? So it's AMQP based, well, it has lots of other protocols, but it's mostly AMQP based messaging as a service, and this is a very good example of the usage of the service catalog. Because as a consumer, as a developer of an application, I'm writing an application, I do not want to care about the infrastructure delivering that application, right? So if I need to connect read and write messages to a queue or to a destination, as a developer, or even as an application architect or enterprise architect, the dynamics of how the services are provisioned should be possibly owned by a different team specializing messaging, or owned by a different team. But from a consumption perspective, you actually just want access to the services. I mean, I'm sure all of you use any of the AWS services. If you go to AWS and you want to use simple notification service or simple queue service, does any of you know exactly what's the technology behind that is delivering the queues or the topics for you? I don't know, right? If you know, I would like to know, but I don't know. It may be IBM Message Broker in the end, but you don't know, because you have a consistent API that you can talk to that's delivering the service capabilities. So for us and for Red Hat, and there will be other sessions around it, messaging as a service, it's a very good example. But considering other products from Red Hat, like JBoss Data Grid, for example, you actually want a place to read and write data from a cache, right? For Red Hat single sign-on, you want to be able to register your applications in a security realm. You don't necessarily want to know how that service is managed or provisioned, right? Another example for BRMS and BPMS, you may want to have your pricing, your rules and your processes published in the catalog so the applications can just consume them. And for API management, that's even a huge, bigger use case, right? We're going to use API management to be, let's say, a generic publish of services. You have your REST endpoint. You want to publish your REST endpoint so that it can be consumed by other applications. We're going to use a tree-scale API management for that. So you're going to magically see services in the catalog that will be able to bind those services to application, and they're going to go through a API gateway. So it's very, very exciting times for us. Question here in the front?
Yeah, you plan to do more dependency management, like you have a service that depends on the queue and the data store, and it could provision them, or it could alert you. You don't have a queue, so I won't even try to deploy the service.
I can answer. That's one of the areas we're working.
Could you repeat the question, D?
Yeah, so the question is like, how do we do dependency management, right? And this is it's a very important aspect, because talking to enterprise architects, they want to define, let's say, declare a blueprint for the application, and they want that blueprint to have the dependencies fulfilled automatically. So if you are deploying an application that requires a service called my queue service, right, we should be able to do the automatic provisioning and binding of that service if there is, for example, a service called my queue service already published in the catalog. Although these mechanics, they do not yet exist in OpenShift, nor Kubernetes, but that's a roadmap. We want to be able to declare the dependencies of your application, and if OpenShift and Kubernetes, they know how to fulfill those dependencies, we're going to have automatic fulfillment of dependencies. Another very great point to that is that you'll be able to have a dependency graph, right? I'll know exactly what applications are talking to other services and providers, and know the impacts of changing services in our applications. So I think we are...
And one last question?
Or time.
Are we good?
I think this is it.
All right.
Thank you very much, Paul, Steve, and Serena, and hope it was useful.
Very good.